And if you're unfamiliar with how the bathrooms work, just ask. Asking is less embarrassing than getting it wrong.
All right, Patrick Klepek, let's talk about Fallout Season 1 in its entirety. You should assume there's going to be spoilers from here on out. But real quick, Patrick Klepek, do you think people should watch the show?
I do. Highly entertaining, highly engaging, really fun characters, fascinating setting, regardless of any experience with the video games. Just a really fun, entertaining season of television.
I also had a great time. It's rare to have post-apocalyptic stuff that's really genuinely hilarious. And this show manages to accomplish that. Characters are great. A lot of the visuals are amazing. And it has something to say. It has something to say about modern society that I thought was quite effective. So strongly recommend Fallout Season 1. Let's talk about what actually happened in the season. When we last covered Fallout a few weeks ago here on Decoding TV, we discussed the show's three main characters, all of whom are trying to track down the actual head of a scientist named Wilzig. There's Lucy, a woman from a vault-tec vault, venturing out to find her father, Hank, who's apparently been kidnapped by a woman named Lee Moldaver. There's Maximus, a guy from the Brotherhood of Steel who's taken the place and power armor of his knight, Titus. Maximus is later joined by Thaddeus, a replacement squire, who learns about Maximus's deception and then takes the head himself and runs. And then there's the Ghoul, a former actor turned extremely skilled and cool bounty hunter. So those are the main characters we follow throughout the season. I'm going to just list, rather, we're not going to recap every episode, but I'll just list a bunch of the adventures they go through. And then, Patrick, let's stop if there's anything we want to talk about with any of these. True to the game, each one of them goes on a number of side quests. Lucy encounters an Oregon harvesting robot and frees a bunch of feral ghouls. She finds chems and gives them to the ghoul. I want to just shout out the voice of the robot. The actor.
Matthew Berry. All-time favorite. Like, what we do in the shadows. Like, I mean, just one of him showing up here was just, I already liked this show. And the idea that you're casting these sorts of like one-off like actors to clearly only be here for a little bit. And we got to get him. We got him in person.
In person,
an origin story. Like, it was great.
An origin story of the voice. He is so perfect as the voice of the robot, right? Like it's like it's amazing casting to have him as the chipper voice of the robot that's going to be doing horrible things to you. So yeah, he's delightful, and yeah, we got to see him in person too. So that was also great.
He needs to be like, Matthew Berry is not a big enough. Like, I'm excited. The Fallout TV show, Walton Goggins is doing great work for a very long time, but it finally feels like with Fallout, he has sort of broken through. There's I think people are going to go back and check out Righteous Gemstones and Justified and just realize how much great work Goggins has been doing for a long time now, but it's at least being appreciated on a bigger scale. Like, okay, next up, like someone like Matthew Berry, like he's like doing unbelievable work in lots of different things, including what we do in the shadows, the FX show. But I wish he was bigger. Like, he's just so fucking funny. And he knocks out this very brief bit he gets in this show, but I wish he was around longer in lots of other things.
Agreed completely. So what else happens this season? Lucy and Maximus team up, and they encounter Shady Sands, an above-ground city and the capital of the New California Republic that seemed to be going okay before it was bombed to oblivion. I wonder what happened there. While seeking medical assistance, Lucy and Maximus end up in another vault where it turns out everyone is a mutant. See, there were human experiments conducted back in the day by scientists that ran the place, but the Vault 4 citizens successfully fought back. Anyway, this whole sequence is like complete side quest energy, right? Like,
yes,
you're doing your quest, you literally get sucked into this other location, and then they need to figure out what's going on. The way it all played out was hilarious. Chris Parnell plays a Cyclops who is, I think he's the overseer, right? And he's running the whole place. And then he, because Lucy breaks in and see what kind of experiments are going on in level 12, they decide to banish her. And then the whole banishment ceremony is funny because you think they're going to kill her, but then they're instead like cutting her ropes with this massive blade in hilarious fashion. Maximus is like, hey, I actually like it here. This is great. I would love to just stay here. But then obviously destroys his chances by getting in the armor and smashing everyone. Everything just played out in for maximum humorous effect, what do you think of this whole side quest, Patrick Clemens?
Well, yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. It also gave Maximus like a real time, like that character time to shine and have like some of the most nuance the character gets over the course of the season. Like the Brotherhood of Steel is a complete mess. It's like the biggest misfire of the season, mostly just because they just do not give the faction nearly enough time to have an understanding of what they other than scary religious people with the big. It's just they do not flesh them out in any meaningful way for how important they are in like the overall trajectory of the plot. But Maximus is I think he's a great character. It's rare to see black actors get like the nervous, anxious energy that is normally given to like a lot of white actors. Like I saw a lot of, did you watch The Good Place?
Yes.
And so like Chidi, like similar sort of character. And like I adored Chidi in The Good Place, and I adore like Maximus here, where it's just the most we get about the Brotherhood of Steel, the indoctrination they're doing, what they're telling them about like sex, like masculinity is like through this character. And it's funneled through a lot of funny humor, but like deep, like reveals something deeply upsetting and disturbing. And it's the most we get about the Brotherhood of Steel and what they represent as a faction. And watching him in that specific episode go through the arc of asking Lucy a question about sex, like being able to go to a place with comfort and like being able to relax, taking a shower. Like for all the fun that is, put Lucy in a weird situation and I see how she gets out of it. That's always a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the kind of conclusion to a lot of this bundle of nervous energy that Maximus has had throughout the course of the season being plopped into something completely different. And so I really enjoyed his arc in this stuff too, even as I was bothered by the lack of any detail on the Brotherhood of Steel. It was like, I, as the person who knows more about like the lore and the world and like have played the games, like I'm bringing more to it than the show is. And so like my wife would ask questions about them. I was like, well, I don't know how the show is deploying this information. And so I don't want to spoil something for you if it has like a clever way that it's going to roll this out. And by the end of the first season, it's like, oh, there's not like a clever rollout of what's going on here. Like they're just going to kind of ignore the Brotherhood of Steel as a faction.
I also thought the Brotherhood of Steel was like the most disappointing part of the season. I would say the thing I could not get over is every time Maximus messes up, they promote him is kind of what my issue with. In the very first episode, he is thought to have injured his friend who is going to be a squire. Now we find out at the end of the show that he didn't actually do that, right? But they're like, okay, well, I guess you can take their place, that's cool. And then in like later on in the show, in season 1, he comes back with a fake head and they're about to kill him. But then the guy's like, well, how about instead of killing you, you come with me and we can start a new life together, a new society together. It's like, what? Like this guy has done nothing but betray you and mess up, and you keep trying to give him more chances. It made absolutely no sense. I do think that there is something about the vaults being like a very dystopian environment, but also for Maximus, it's incredible. It reminded me a lot about my dad, where my dad worked in a restaurant that he owned for 16 years and then sold the restaurant and kind of retired. Didn't retire from work, but he retired from being in a restaurant, and then he like got an office job doing hospital records, like filing hospital records. And some people might say, wow, that sounds pretty mind-numbing and taxing. To my dad, it was like a freaking vacation. Because it's like he doesn't need to be on his feet all day.
Mm-hmm.
He gets a desk, maybe even a cubicle. Like it's quiet.
Whoa, Dave, stop. I mean, what else could this job be offering?
Right. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's some people might be like, wow, that sounds like a mind-numbing thing that I wouldn't want to do necessarily.
Exactly. But, you just described the good part.
right. But for my dad, it's like, oh, this is like a vacation compared to what he's doing before. Same dynamic here where obviously Maximus has had a hard life and being in the Brotherhood doesn't seem easy. And then so it's like vault-tec, wow, being in a vault, incredible. Sure, they have really vague and nebulous things that they do to run these places, but I'm sure we can deal with that later. They have caviar. So
they do have caviar. Yes.
anyway, Lucy and Maximus manage to escape, and there is kind of this romantic attraction between them. Gotta say, I think these actors are great, and I think they have great chemistry as friends. I did not feel any romantic chemistry from these two actors at all. Had kind of a similar feeling in some ways about the two main characters in Shogun as well. You know, like
Mhm.
where like I think that relationship is way more interesting as a non-romantic one. Personally, that's just me personally. Patrick Klepek, did you find yourself shipping these two characters, Lucy and Maximus? What do you think?
Well, I mean, we early in the show when Lucy is sort of being assigned to to have sex with someone she is not related to outside and from one of the other vaults, uh, even those turn out to be raiders. But what is the first thing she does is jump this guy and is like, "I need to have sex immediately."
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a character who's very naive and has never really experienced sex, love, like other like there's a lot of things that are new to her. It's the whole point that makes her dynamic going from the vault to the wasteland interesting. It does not surprise me that she falls in love with the first character, like the first person she meets that shows her any sort of genuine, attractions, feelings, a care, empathy outside of the strict confines that she has been in within the vault. The thing is, I don't know that the show is necessarily portraying this as like Lucy being naive and falling for the first guy that gets in front of her. Maybe that's something the show
Well,
will
she does.
like.
She does say, "You're the only person here who hasn't like betrayed me, or who's been really, who's been kind to me." And then he, at that point, he confesses that he
He's been lying,
lied.
right?
He's been lying
Yes.
the whole time. But then she's like, "You know what? That's the least problematic thing someone has done."
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so I don't really blame the character. It's more that I think I'm with you. Like, I don't really buy. Like, I buy the logic from a character perspective of course, you would kind of immediately have like puppy dog eyes, teenage like sort of like, oh, like this is my first love. And for me, I'm willing to give it a little bit of rope because I want to see what they end up doing with it in further seasons, because I don't think they're done with these two characters and interactions. If like where we're going in the future is like this is the great love that
Right.
like must be united, that's
Yeah.
like hard for me to
Yeah.
buy. I don't buy that for these two characters. But if where it ends up going is that they think they love each other, but like they're just, and that's just surviving in the wasteland. This is where these two characters needed each other, and that resulted in these feelings for one another. But when Lucy is such a changed person by the end of the first season, she's going off on a completely different sort of adventure. I do not expect her to group up with Maximus anytime soon in season 2. If she becomes a more complicated character, where by the time they get together, it's like a better understanding of who we are, what that was. Kind of like when, you have a high school romance, you go to college and you realize, oh, like there's other forms of attraction and I need to have more experiences to realize what I really want. That'll be more interesting than they need to get together so they can run away from all of this madness and
Right.
like love each other. So I'm in a similar place, but I'm willing to give the show a little bit more time to
Right.
work out what exactly they are.
That's fair. That's fair. But I think we feel the same way about it, which
Yeah.
is these two characters have a really interesting relationship. But I don't quite buy that it's like a romantic one, just based on what's already on screen.
It feels like circumstance. Like
Yes,
I
yes.
understand why they care so deeply for one another.
Yeah.
And would want to bone based
Yeah.
on circumstance. I
But
don't
maybe they'll
necessarily
comment on it. Maybe they'll comment on that
Right.
later on, right? Like, and that could be interesting. All right, Thaddeus gets his leg crushed trying to escape from Maximus, then ends up being transformed into a ghoul when he allows a random stranger on the side of the road to inject medicine into him. This whole thing is like Thaddeus is a character. Like, wow, man, just became like one of my favorite characters out of nowhere. This guy,
great.
by the way, the actor who plays Thaddeus, he has been doing great. Johnny Pemberton, I believe, is his name, right? He's been doing great work for a long time. I remember one of the first things I ever saw him in was the movie In the Loop, the Armando Iannucci movie. Have you seen that movie? He plays a like a U.S. government official, and the joke is that he looks so young. He has like a Patrick Klepek-esque baby face, and like Malcolm Tucker shows up, and this guy, he's like, "Sorry, but you look like you're supposed to still be eating alphabet spaghettis." Like what's going on here? He's kind of a character actor that's been in a lot of things, and then kind of went from that to, in my opinion, being like one of the MVPs of the show.
Yeah.
Bringing a lot of great energy to Fallout. I love when he takes off his sock and then his like toe falls off. It like looks so bad, and then they do it again, and they do it again, and I'm like, when he did it the second time, I'm like, it's gonna look even grosser the second time, isn't it? And like I don't know, it looked grosser, but it looked horrible both times. But I love this whole subplot, Patrick Klepek, of Thaddeus getting injected with medicine from a random stranger, because it's kind of a commentary, I think, on how this happens in the video game, where if you're in Fallout or any other game, and you're kind of traveling through hell, the wasteland, wherever, and then you find a random guy on the side of the road selling medicine, and it's like, yes, give me like 8 gold coins and you can have this medicine and you just trust some random dude with like freaking medicine in his trench coat.
I'm sure these stim packs in this Rad-X is going to do exactly what it says on the label.
Right. Yeah.
Well, they even have the ghoul doing that as well, where there's moments where he's just dumping drugs into his system, and you do that in the games. It's like, whoops, I walked through the irradiated waste. I have very little health.
Yeah, I'm
like full of radiation. Time to just like smash A on the controller till I ingest like 6 different consumables, and I'm fine again. Same with I don't know if they're pulling from game, like if this is an example of them, much like Encumbrance pulling from the game, but like you can break your legs in Fallout. Like if you experience a certain amount of fall damage, you can break your foot, and then you can just magically patch yourself up to be good again. And that's a little bit of what happens here. Is like, I don't know, you just ingest some magic health juice, and like a foot is completely solved. So it does feel like, again, one of those things where they understand what's happening in the games. They find a way to deploy it in an interesting way that's funny if you can see the through line to how video game logic operates. But then they take it a step further by like the consequences that, he is now a ghoul. What does that mean? I expect we'll find out more about that in season 2, because the show is far more interested in the mechanics of the ghouls and how they operate in a way that the show or the games have never really explored.
Interesting. I think the way they did the ghoul stuff was actually really smart in the show. No one sits down and is like, here's how ghouls work. They just kind of expect you to grasp that it's not something you want to become. It's something the Brotherhood would probably kill you for. You just kind of get all that without them needing to say it. And when Thaddeus realizes he's probably a ghoul, the way he finds out is pretty funny, with the arrow fired through his neck and stuff. Appropriately gross,
I mean, there's a decent lack of exposition dump in this show in general. It saves that for the emotional climax,
the final episode. Yeah.
But it feels earned, right?
Right.
We finally, it's a lot like video games. Like the characters finally get in a room, and like you learn a lot of context for like what has brought you to this moment. And so it didn't feel out of place with where they do decide to like unload exposition, but they find good ways of doing world building, explaining the relationships between like characters, objects, enemies in the world in a way that doesn't, like you said, feel like the character looking at the screen like they would in a Bethesda game and being like, and here's how the ghouls work, which would be very easy to do, especially if you feel like, is the audience going to understand the world building from this video game? Like it's an easy, in fact, understandable trap to fall in as a writer, as you're trying to craft this world. And I think they gave the audience a lot of trust, which I appreciate.
I agree with you completely about all of that. Are there any other Easter eggs from the season that you want to mention? There is this thing that you mentioned in our last conversation called VATS, the vault-tec assisted targeting system. The idea being, in the game, you can target a specific part of an opponent's body. That is kind of referenced in the final episode of the show, where the ghoul mentions a weak point in the ghost armor. He's like, there's a little weakness there in the armor, and that's a thing that you could do with VATS. Anything else you like? That was the biggest thing that stuck out for me is Thaddeus injecting himself with random shit from some random stranger. That felt very video game-esque to me. But yeah, anything else? Any other things you want to mention about stuff that stuck out to you video game logic-wise?
That covers a lot. For me, it was waiting to see. I kept holding back. Like when I was watching the show with my wife, she was very into it. Like, she's like, "What's going on with those vaults?" And I was like, "Oh, like I do know. Like, I do know what's going on with those vaults." And because I was convinced that the show was going to want to. Anyone that's played Fallout knows going into this show that like the reason these vaults feel so odd is because like they're all just like each one is an experiment. And I was like,
right.
I think the show is going to like, that's such a good twist. I was like, I feel like the show is going to want to play that out to the audience. So I kept my mouth shut while we were watching it, even though I kept wanting to, it's like, I do know why everything seems so odd. And it was, I thought they did a great job of leaving that still feel, even if you did know that twist.
Right. Yeah.
Which I did. The show gave it further oomph and emotional context, because what the show does do that the games, as far as I'm aware, never explain why the bombs dropped. The bombs just dropped. Like that is something you just take at face value that the bombs dropped. Who fucking cares why they did? Like what matters is that everything's irradiated and you need to survive. And it's not shocking to me that the show decided, well, actually, like maybe there is something there. And I think they found a satisfying, cynical, earned cynicism like explanation for why did these bombs drop that is more interesting, if a little on the nose, about like what would lead to like this version of at least the United States. We don't have a good sense of Fallout's a very America-centric show. It's never been set anywhere but America. It doesn't really concern itself with what happened elsewhere, just because so much of the satire is built around Americana. But yeah. I thought they did a good job of, even though I knew the aha, I was like, oh, okay, like this wasn't present. This is new. And it's fun that the show is, I think it's finding much of the way the Last of Us show did, but I think Fallout's had to do it more, is like, what are interesting things that we are saying that are additive to the world that exists in a way that The Last of Us was much more translating that to just, a television format.
Well, I think, just to be clear, in the show, it builds up to this big reveal of like, here's what's going on with the vaults. That is not how that plays out in the game, is what you're saying, right? Like, that information is clear to you, but it's not like the climactic scene in any of the games. Is like
you pick up on it, like because a huge thing. Like there's a primary in Fallout, at least the modern games. Like there's a you're on this big old quest, and then you can come across all these different vaults, and what you start to pick up on as you go to each vault is, oh, what fucked up thing happened here? Because you read all of the the terminals they have in the show are very much aesthetically like the same terminals. You're reading all these logs, and you discover through like the overseers, like, oh, this vault was assigned to do X, this vault was assigned to do Y, and they frequently went horribly awry.
So it's very smart the way the show does it, right? Like taking a background stuff that happened in the game and then making it into this big climactic reveal. And the reveal is pretty effective, I think. Maybe a little drawn out, but like pretty effective. So let's talk about what happens. Back at the vault, it turns out Vault 33's leaders have all come from Vault 31, and Lucy's brother, Norm, I believe is his name, tries to uncover why that is. So all plot lines converge. We also get like these flashbacks to the Ghoul when he was an actor named Cooper.
Great stuff. Loved all that flashback stuff.
So all plot lines convert, like the flashbacks of Vault 33, Vault 31, Lucy and Maximus, Lee Moldaver, the Ghoul. They all converge on the season finale as an assault on Lee Moldaver's compound unfolds, which happens on the site of the Griffith Observatory. We learn the horrible truth about vault-tec. It turns out Wilsig's head contains the key to unlocking cold fusion power. Lee Moldaver was actually a scientist in the pre-war time whose cold fusion was shelved because vault-tec themselves had a better plan for making money, starting the nuclear war themselves to end all wars and increase shareholder value. Vault 31 holds the cryogenically frozen bodies of a bunch of middle managers from vault-tec, and each of them is given power to run the vaults as they see fit, as kind of human experiments of sorts. We also learn the truth about Lucy's father. He was also a vault-tec executive, and when his wife tried to take Lucy and run to the surface, Hank responded by nuking Shady Sands. Moldaver herself is trying to use the cold fusion power embedded in Wilzig's head to give literal power back to the people. Couple things to talk about here. The flashback stuff, as you said, really effective. When you realize what's going on, it's kind of chilling. But my favorite bit is they all start talking about how they want to run the vaults, right? Essentially, this corporation is saying, we're going to nuke everyone, and all the middle managers here are going, or junior executives, they're called, are going to get to run their own vault, and may the best version of society win. It's going to be survival of the fittest. And they're talking about like what they would do to run a vault, and one of them says something along the lines of, hey, there is a machine that can deliver milk. What if one of those ran the vault? Like that was my favorite one of the suggestions. Was like, what if the milk machine ran a vault? My brother has played the Fallout games, and whenever he talks about the Fallout games, he always tells me this story about this vault that he found in one of the Fallout games that was like, everyone was dead in the vault. And the only change the vault did was it divided everyone arbitrarily into a red team and a blue team. And like no other changes. They didn't like sort by any physical attributes or anything. There's just like half of you are red, half of you are blue. Everyone was dead by the end, which really stuck with him as a comment, like a sharp commentary on human nature. But anyway, it's a great twist. It turns out that corporations really want to increase shareholder value. They're going to bomb people if that's required to do so. And the idea that junior executives are running everything is just really funny and dark, because I think it's a commentary about how, financialization in America has taken over everything, and how we're letting corporations run even the most core aspects of our society. And maybe we should reevaluate this. It seems to me is what the show is saying. Patrick Klepek, any reactions to this whole sequence of events?
I think you nailed it. And it's a fun reveal. Like it gives, I was genuinely surprised. I mean, I guess you don't cast someone like Walton Goggins unless you're going to give him something like juicy to work with. But I was like, ghouls are not characters in are not primary protagonists in Fallout games, even though there are ghouls you talk to. And so I just thought it was an interesting choice to make this a primary protagonist, and then to give him like the richest arc of or one of them. I mean, there's a lot of good arcs in the show, but like at the very least, a very rich arc was more than I expected from this kind of like enemy type from the Fallout games. And so to combine that in with an explanation for like a big question in Fallout lore that doesn't feel like they're just like, oh, time to answer this blank, because the games communicate to you, who cares? Like you're not thinking as you're playing the games like, how did these bombs drop? Because it's about the world that is, not the world that was. But I don't know. I really enjoyed the way they arrived at this answer. I think it's a very rich expansion of, because the show is canon, right? Like there are different ways that these adaptations work. The idea that they want it to be canon, I thought that was an enormous red flag to start with. I was like, just tell a good story. Like, who cares what happened in the games? And they were smart enough to navigate all that. And ultimately, I think it's richer that it's canon, even if that's a very dangerous route to go that I don't really, just adaptations in general, not video games aside. I just think tell a good story with the tools that you have here, be your own thing. But they went a harder route, and I thought they nailed it.
Agreed completely. It's a great sequence where you're like multiple, like it takes a lot of skill to have it so that like I think 4 different character groups are having the same realization at once, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's Lucy and Hank, there's Norm in Vault 31. The ghoul already knows everything, but you see his flashback realize things, right? And so it's like everyone is kind of learning the information at the same time as the audience, and that's like really like the way they intercut between the different storylines. So that was very effective. one thing I couldn't stop thinking about, Patrick Klepek, was how this recontextualizes the events of episode 1. Because when we meet Cooper Howard, he is hanging out with his daughter at a birthday party, right? His wife's not there. And so my sense was that like they had split up, or that he had taken his daughter away from his wife. And so there's a whole like tragedy there that you didn't even see on screen. And then when the bombs drop, the idea that Cooper Howard knows where the bombs are coming from gives that sequence an entire new sense of pathos. You know what I mean?
He says at the end too, "Where's my family?" Right?
Yes.
So that opening sequence in episode 1 where he rides off on the horse as the bombs are just dropping, spectacularly in the background. You certainly get the sense, based on that piece of information, that maybe he knew exactly where to go, and that he was not going to be let in that vault, but maybe he was going to be able to get his daughter to safety in time. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if he and his wife were no longer together at that point. Like, I don't know if it's clear. Maybe it is clear, and I apologize if I missed that detail. But
no, I mean, my reading on it was like that. Like they are separate. Like they are not. Yeah.
Like he would not. But what is definitely clear is he knows his wife is responsible for the bombs. Like that is 100% clear in the show, in my opinion.
Yes.
So. Yeah, that's all I could think about was like, how does it recontextualize those events? And then, as you mentioned, his family is apparently still alive. So that's going to be a thing that's going to probably play out in future seasons. All right. As the finale ends, Lucy's brother Norm is trapped in Vault 31. Lee Moldaver has activated the cold fusion reactor successfully right before she dies. Maximus is about to be knighted for successfully killing Lee Moldaver. And Hank arrives at a location that is going to be familiar to Fallout video game players, New Vegas. Lucy and the ghoul are hot on his trail. Now, Patrick Klepek, without spoiling anything, can you provide just a little bit of sense of like why New Vegas might be important to, and like there's a game called Fallout New Vegas. Mm-hmm. Like, what is your sense of what the significance of New Vegas is in this universe?
I don't think there's anything to spoil. Like, that's part of what's unique about the show, is that it's, because it's canon, it's not going to be, or at least it seems unlikely that it's going to be adapting storylines from the original game, because it is set after the events of, I think the show is the furthest along in the timeline. Like it is like, we'll see where Fallout 5, which has been announced but is many years off, where that ends. But it is not as though it's arriving concurrent with like where the player character might be in Fallout New Vegas. And so you could sort of start to take away storylines, characters. It's been long enough now that, I mean, I played Fallout New Vegas, 15 years ago, like if not more. I forget exactly when that game came out. I think it was like 2010 or something like that. But it's a really iconic location. It has some of, famously some of the best stories like in the modern Fallout games. It is often revered as like a better game, more interesting game than Fallout 3, Fallout 4, Fallout 76. And so the fact that they're choosing to revisit that location it's really fucking exciting. Like it
sounds like it's like visually interesting, right?
It's really kind of, visually. Yeah. Imagine Vegas, but like, reinvented in the apocalypse. Yes. Right. Like, and given how funny so much of the show has been, which has been a pretty seamless adaptation of a lot of the humor present in Fallout as a franchise, like it's a really rich vein to tap. And I'm really curious to see if there's a lot of Easter eggs they could pull from. There's a lot of interesting characters they could pull from. It's really exciting. It speaks to, once again, the people running this show, like, fucking get it. Like, you don't choose New Vegas unless you are a Fallout freak. Like, that is just not the location you pick unless they just know what they're doing. And at this point, I'm in their hands. Like, I cannot wait to see what they do with the confidence of a full season. I mean, often first seasons can be very bumpy. And this one is not without its bumps, but it's like, man, like season 2 could just be cooking if they're able to just, hit the ground running with this world they've already got in front of them.
I think they did a great job. Like it's a really enjoyable show. I am kind of really engrossed in this world in a way I haven't been for many, many years. So I'm really looking forward to a second season as well. Like you said, some bumps. The biggest ones being Brotherhood of Steel. That whole subplot I thought was pretty rough, but everything else felt pretty good to me. So yeah, and the conclusion really is a sharp and brutal commentary. So
Yeah.
I
I'm,
like
I'm hoping with the Brotherhood of Steel, like, yes, Maximus has just been promoted for no real good reason. But part of the reason it was so difficult for the show to give any context to the faction was there was no reason to visit them. You know what I mean? Maximus was on his own journey, separated from the Brotherhood of Steel. Now that he is with them, presumably we'll be spending more time with that faction more broadly. And hopefully that will give the show a chance to like do something with them, as opposed to just like having to just like, there was just no reason to ever cut back to like, and what's happening with the Brotherhood of Steel.
Right.
So it's he was never there.
Whenever the
very
Brotherhood
end.
of Steel is not on screen, people should be asking what they're doing. That's kind of the rules. Yeah. All right. Any other subplots to mention here, Patrick Klepek, before we wrap this up for Fallout Season 1?
Nothing immediately comes to mind. I'm just highly impressed. Like I wish there was more. Zach Cherry, people probably, if you watch Severance, like he played Woody in the Fallout show and in the Vault, like one of the guys that was trying to become the new overseer. I mean, look, anytime you cast him in something, I'm like, oh, okay, you know what you're doing. Like he is just so good. I hope they give him more to do in season 2. And I wonder what is the role of Lucy's original vault, right? Like, it's like, obviously,
what
Lucy's
was the
brother,
experiment going on?
Not even just the experiment, but just we're like the propulsion of the show is leaving that behind, right? Like we're shifting to a new location, presumably very far from where we're at. Like, what does Lucy's brother? What does that vault? What role does it have to play in the future? I don't know. So,
a couple final things, Patrick Klepek, about Fallout Season 1. We learn in the finale that Lucy's mom is still alive, and she is a ghoul.
And
she's just kind of sitting there hanging out with Lee Moldaver. And I'm just curious, like, that felt a little odd to me. Like, what was she doing there? Like, was Lee Moldaver keeping her alive, keeping her hostage? Like, I don't really get
my reading on. I think that they were in a relationship. I think part of the reason she was leaving with Lucy was to go be with her. And that part of the reason that the reaction where they end up nuking that city was this feeling of betrayal that like he was being left like for this other romance. I actually think they're like intimately involved, and that will be something that gets explored to some degree in the second season. And so I think keeping her around is an expression of like a lost love.
But that's not in the text of the show, right? But
it's not in the text of the show, but like the way those scenes are shot where she's leaving, like if you go back and watch them, there is like a romantic, like emotional twinge to them that I read, combined with keeping the ghoul version of Lucy's mom around, as this wasn't just some friend she was joining. There was something more going on there.
Interesting. Would also help explain why Lee Moldaver kept Lucy's mom alive all these years.
Right.
It doesn't seem like there's any, like Hank obviously has no affection for her, and it's not like she used her as a bargaining chip for so anyway, it's an interesting interpretation. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.